Hi, I'm Anthony Originello, CEO of the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources for BC and Yukon. We represent more than 8,000 members, and as the organization dedicated to advancing the HR profession through education, advocacy, awareness, professional development, as well as our recognized and impactful CPHR designation, we are proud to be a sponsor of this show. We have been the voice of the HR profession since 1942. Learn more about us at cphrbc.ca.
In this episode of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Pamela McDonald, the Director of Communications and Education at the BC Securities Commission. Welcome, Pam.
Hi, Stu.
What exactly is your job?
So I am the Director of Communications and Education at the BC Securities Commission, and I do a number of things in my role. So I oversee all our communications activities, whether that's news releases, for example. We are a government crown corporation. We communicate heavily with government, and so we prepare issues notes and other communications for them. We do industry education, so we communicate with our public companies, private companies, investment firms, and people who sell securities. So we share information with them. On the education side, that's a really important role for us because in protecting investors is part of our mandate, and one of the big ways we protect them is by educating them. So our education platform is all about helping people understand how to become smarter, empowered investors.
You've got kind of a diverse network of channels that you're having to communicate with. Do you do it all yourself, or do you have a team?
I have a team. There's about 18 of us. So
18?
18 of us.
Wow.
That's right. So I have a media team. So we and that's one thing I didn't mention, is we respond a lot to media inquiries about perhaps our enforcement actions or about policy initiatives that we have. So I have 2 people on the media team, and these people are also the group that prepares all the releases and issues notes for government. I have an investor education and engagement team, and that's a group that develops all our investor education initiatives, and we do outreach to investors and to investing groups like Probus clubs, Rotarian groups, for example. I have a corporate communications group, and they do our external communications, so to industry. And we have a sponsorship program attached to that. One of the reasons we do that is because all of our communications, we want people to know about the Securities Commission and what we do and why we're important in their lives, that there is an organization that's out there protecting them when it comes to their investing lives. Internal communications is also a part of that group, so communicating with our 300 staff at the Commission. And then we also oversee the inquiries group, or our contact center. So if people call us with tips or complaints or questions about investing, we have a contact center group that can be reached out to. And then I have one person that oversees all our marketing and advertising efforts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as a typical day for you?
Not really.
No?
No. There's some standard things that happen over the course of the year. So we produce reports, our annual report, our annual service plan, which is our government business plan, if you will, for the year. We produce a BC Capital Markets report, which talks about how sectors in BC are performing, how they're raising money, that kind of thing, where the money's coming from. Those things are very standard. When we have the tribunals I talked about, the panels that sometimes these bad actors come before, our panels make decisions and we communicate those. So those are very standard things. But sometimes, things do come out of the blue that we have to respond to very quickly. And it could be something, market related. It could be just a significant investing issue in Canada that comes up that we need to respond to.
Well, let's take a look at your career path and what prepared you for this. Where did you graduate from secondary school?
I graduated from secondary school here in North Vancouver. And then I went to, I graduated from UBC.
So you went to UBC.
I went to
Did you know what
UBC.
you wanted to do when you went to UBC, or did
No.
you just say, I'm going to continue my education and see what happens?
I said, I'm going to continue my education in English and French, and that's what I did. But my father was a stockbroker. He was in the investment industry, and I took a keen interest in that all my life. So when I got out of university, I didn't know where I was going to work, but I took the Canadian Securities course, the Registered Representatives course, and the Options course, and I went to work in the investment industry as an assistant to a stockbroker.
Wow.
And eventually, I ended up being a stockbroker on my own, and I didn't like it one bit.
Oh my, okay.
But I thought, what do I really like about this business? And what I liked the most was talking to people and communicating, sharing information with people and talking to people and helping people in their investment lives. I liked that. So I thought, where can I use this financial communications tool that I want to use? And I actually packed my bags. I moved to England and I worked in London in a financial public relations firm for 3 years. And it was great. I worked for public companies, for mutual fund companies, and then I came back to Canada.
So you were able to do that job because of your grounding in the financial sector.
In the financial sector, and I was lucky because I have a family that are British, so I was able to live and work there. That was not a problem for me, so I was very fortunate in that respect.
Yeah.
But then eventually came back to Canada and did the same sort of thing in public relations firms here.
In Vancouver.
In Vancouver. Yeah.
Okay. I know that you took a detour, though.
I did.
It landed you in Ottawa.
I did.
What was that detour and why did you take it?
I have always taken an interest in politics, and in my first year of university, I decided that the Federal Liberal Party was the party for me. It aligned most with my values, so I got very seriously involved. And in 1993, when the federal Liberal government was elected, I went to work in Ottawa. And in 1997, I went to work for the Prime Minister, and I stayed working for him, Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, until he retired at the end of 2003.
So what was your role in the PMO?
Yeah, I was the special advisor for British Columbia in the Prime Minister's office.
What did that job look like?
So that job was about understanding the key issues in British Columbia, creating strong relationships between the provincial government and the federal government, and that was wonderful. I loved that part of my job, getting to know the premiers at the time. And looking out for the Prime Minister's and the government's best interests in Canada. So when the Prime Minister wanted to make an announcement in British Columbia, what was the best thing that would align the government interests and BC's interests? So, the Olympics was a big part of that. The Canada Line was a big part of that. Investing money in the Trade and Convention Center was a part of that. Kicking Horse Canyon, for example, and staying on top of really important issues. So you recall the softwood lumber issue that still carries on today was a very important issue for the Liberal government of the day.
So what brought you back to the financial sector in your current role? Having come out of the Prime Minister's office, how did you get back to being in the financial sector?
So I did different things after the Prime Minister resigned in 2003. And one of the things I did was go to work for the Toronto Port Authority, which actually owns an airport, Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport. And that was a fascinating job, dealing with many interesting issues about an airport in an urban environment.
On an island.
On an island, yeah. And that was fascinating, and I loved it. And then one day I got a call from a search firm, from a headhunter. And they said, there is a job coming up at the BC Securities Commission. It's the Director of Communications and Education. And given your background, I think you want to consider applying for it. And if you're thinking about coming back to Vancouver, this is, could be the job for you. So I was happy at the Toronto Port Authority. And then one day, I don't know, I thought, you know what, I am going to apply for that job. And I did, and I got the job, and that was in 2013. And it has been a marvelous place to work, not just because of the fascinating issues, issues related to the securities industry that I like, but they're interesting issues. They change dramatically all the time. This is an enormously interesting time in the securities industry, but it's a great organization. The people are good people. And those two things were so important to me. I remember thinking, working for the Prime Minister was the privilege of a lifetime, and I will probably never have a job like that. And that's true. But I am working in a truly great organization right now with fabulous issues and really good people.
So a young person's looking at you going, I want to have a career like yours. What was the essential element of your personality, the way you go about taking on the challenges of life, that you think was important for you to be able to continue to grow in your career?
I think you have to be brave. You have to be willing to take some risks. And sometimes I think, if you take smart risks, they will work out for you. And sometimes, your career path does take a little jog off the main path, and that happens to many of us. But I think you have to be willing to take some risks. And, it was always important for me to be able to talk to people and get advice from people. Don't be alone. You don't have to be alone. Reach out and talk to people who can help you make these decisions. I've always been a big networker, and I believe strongly in connecting people. And I do it to this day, connecting young people or trying to connect them and help them, I think can be an enormously powerful thing in your career development.
I agree. As you say that, I want to give a shout out to Perry Bellegarde, who when I did an interview with him when he was the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, he said something that I wrote down and put on my wall. If you can't build relationships, you can't build anything.
Yeah.
And you're echoing that, and I think it's absolutely true.
Yeah, very important.
Thank you, Pam.
Thanks, Stu.